Ji Woo stood at the entrance of the Galactic Academy of Higher Learning, clutching her small bag of belongings. The massive doors towered 3 times her height, made for beings much larger than humans. She took a deep breath and walked forward. The doors sensed her approach and slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the main hall buzzed with activity. Tall, slender aliens with blue skin moved gracefully between classes. 4 armed beings carried multiple devices at once. Floating creatures drifted near the high ceiling. Among them all, Ji Woo was the only human. A small robot rolled up to her. "Student Ji Woo Park, please follow me to your orientation." Ji Woo nodded and followed the robot down a wide hallway. Other students turned to stare at her. Some pointed, others whispered to each other. One group of tall blue students laughed openly as she passed. "Look at those weak limbs," one said loudly. "How do they even lift anything?" "I heard humans need to sleep for 8 hours every day," another added. "What a waste of time." Ji Woo kept her eyes forward and her face calm. She had been warned about this. Humans were new to the galactic community. Many species thought them primitive and weak. The robot led her to a small office where Director Han waited. He was the only other human Ji Woo had seen since arriving at the station. "Welcome to the academy, Ji Woo," Director Han said with a warm smile. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "Yes, sir," Ji Woo replied, "though I don't remember much of it. I slept most of the way." Director Han's smile faltered for just a moment. "Yes, long-distance space travel can be like that. Now, let's go over your schedule." He handed her a thin tablet. "Your first class starts in 30 minutes. Basic galactic history with Professor Duck. Then interspecies communication, followed by applied sciences." Ji Woo scanned the schedule and nodded. "I'm ready." Director Han studied her face carefully. "Remember why you're here, Ji Woo. You represent all of humanity. Some students will try to provoke you. Stay calm. Prove them wrong through your actions, not your words." "I understand," Ji Woo said. Something about his intensity made her wonder if there was more to his warning. The history classroom was designed in a circle, with seats rising upward like a bowl. Ji Woo found her assigned seat near the bottom. As soon as she sat down, the blue-skinned student next to her moved to another seat. Professor Duck, a tall being with 6 eyes arranged in a circle around his head, began the lesson. "Today we continue our study of the Galactic Peace Treaty, signed 10 standard years ago after the Great Conflict." Ji Woo listened carefully. Something about this topic felt important, though she couldn't say why. "The treaty brought previously hostile species into our educational and economic alliance," Professor Duck continued, "including the newest members, humans." At this, a student with gleaming scales raised a hand. "Professor, why was Earth even included? They contributed nothing to galactic development." From behind Ji Woo, a voice called out, "They're just lucky we decided not to wipe them out." Laughter rippled through the room. Professor Duck raised his 4 hands for quiet. "That's quite enough, Tai-Ho," he said, addressing someone behind Ji Woo. She turned to see a blue-skinned student with glowing white eyes staring at her. Unlike the others of his kind, he wore an ornate silver band around his head. "The luminary remember what happened," Tai-Ho said, his eyes never leaving Ji Woo. "Some of us lost family in the Earth campaigns." Ji Woo felt a strange chill. She knew humans had fought to join the galactic community, but the details were fuzzy in her mind. "Political discussions are for diplomatic theory class," Professor Duck said firmly. "Now the key provisions of the treaty include." As the lesson continued, Ji Woo felt Tai-Ho's eyes on her back. When class ended, he blocked her path to the door. "You don't even know, do you?" he asked quietly. "Know what?" Ji Woo replied, keeping her voice steady. Tai-Ho leaned closer. "What your kind did. What you did." Before Ji Woo could respond, Director Han appeared at the doorway. "Ji Woo, you're needed for additional orientation," he called. Tai-Ho stepped back, his expression cold. "Enjoy your time here," Human. It won't last. Jai-Woo walked away, her heart beating fast. What had he meant? What was it she didn't know? In the empty hallway, a sudden pain shot through her head. For just a moment, she saw strange images, stars exploding, ships burning, and her own hands commanding it all. Then the vision was gone, leaving her confused and shaken. Ji-Woo tossed in her sleep. The sheets twisted around her legs. In her dream, she stood on the bridge of a massive ship. Stars streaked past the windows. People in uniforms waited for her orders. Ji-Woo's dream self smiled. Let them come. Execute Pattern 7. The dream shifted. Explosions filled the darkness of space. Ships much larger than hers broke apart. She watched without emotion, giving more orders as her smaller fleet moved with perfect precision. Ji-Woo woke with a gasp, her heart racing. The small room in the Academy's human quarters came into focus. Just a dream, she told herself, but it had felt so real. She checked the time. 500 hours. Classes wouldn't start for 3 more hours, but she knew she couldn't go back to sleep. These dreams had been coming more often since she arrived at the Academy 2 weeks ago. Ji-Woo got up and prepared for the day. As she brushed her teeth, she stared at her reflection. Plain face, ordinary brown eyes. Nothing special. Why did Taeho and his friends hate her so much? And why did Director Han watch her so closely? Today we will discuss the Battle of Orion's Belt, Professor Doc announced in history class. This was the turning point in the great conflict 10 years ago. Ji-Woo sat up straighter. Her dreams last night had been about a battle. The professor activated a holographic display showing 2 fleets facing each other. One was massive, with ships of different designs. The other was smaller, with uniform vessels in tight formation. The Allied Species Force had superior numbers and technology, Professor Doc explained. The Earth Defense Fleet was outnumbered 5-1. Victory for the Alliance seemed certain. Ji-Woo stared at the smaller fleet. Something about its arrangement looked familiar. But then, the professor continued, the Earth forces used an unexpected strategy. Does anyone know what happened next? Without thinking, Ji-Woo raised her hand. Professor Doc looked surprised. Yes, student Ji-Woo. They used the Phantom Maneuver, she said. The words came from somewhere deep in her mind. The Earth ships created the illusion of retreat, then split into 3 attack groups. They targeted the command ships first, creating confusion. Then they used the Alliance's size against them by forcing friendly fire situations. That is correct, he said slowly, though that level of detail isn't in our standard texts. From behind her, Taeho spoke up. How convenient that humans remember their victories so well but forget the deaths they caused. I read about it, Ji-Woo said quickly, though she couldn't remember where. I like military history. After class, a small green student with large eyes approached Ji-Woo. That was amazing how you knew all that. I'm Unji, half human on my mother's side. Ji-Woo smiled, grateful for the friendly face. Nice to meet you. As they walked together, Taeho and 3 other luminary students blocked their path. Showing off your species one lucky victory, Taeho asked. The Dismantler got lucky once. It won't happen again. The Dismantler? Ji-Woo asked. The luminary students laughed. She doesn't even know her own heroes. One said, the human commander who led that battle. Yunji whispered, no one knows their real identity. They were called the Dismantler because they took apart the Allied fleet piece by piece. Taeho stepped closer to Ji-Woo. My father was on the main command ship. He never came home. I'm sorry, Ji-Woo said automatically. Your fake sympathy means nothing, Taeho said. His eyes began to glow brighter. Humans don't belong here. You're too weak. Small objects around them, pens, papers, a water bottle, began to float. The luminary had telekinetic abilities, Ji-Woo remembered. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Ji-Woo's head. She saw flashes of light, heard explosions. Without thinking, she stepped to the side and spoke firmly. Your concentration breaks when you move your left hand. Your telekinesis has a range of 8 meters, and you can't maintain it for more than 30 seconds without strain. The objects dropped. Taiho stared at her, shocked. How did you? He began. Jae-woo blinked, equally surprised at her own words. I don't know. I just guessed. Director Han appeared in the hallway. Is there a problem here? No, sir, Taiho said, backing away with his friends. But his eyes never left Ji-woo's face. Later, alone in her room, Ji-woo's hands shook as she took out her tablet. She searched for information about the Dismantler, but found very little. Just that they were the most successful human commander in the Great Conflict, and that they had disappeared after the peace treaty was signed. That night, her dreams were more vivid than ever. She saw herself giving orders to destroy the very same ships from the history lesson. And in the dream, she was called Commander. 1 month after Ji-woo's arrival at the Galactic Academy, a loud announcement echoed through all rooms and hallways. Attention all students. The annual Academy competition will begin in 7 days. All students must participate. Winners bring honor to their species and receive special privileges. Jae-woo sat in the cafeteria with Yeon-ji, picking at her food. The human-adapted meals never tasted quite right. Are you going to enter? Yeon-ji asked. Do I have a choice? Ji-woo replied. Yeon-ji smiled. Not really. But you should try your best. Show them humans aren't weak. Jae-woo sighed. What exactly is this competition? There are 3 parts, Yeon-ji explained. Physical challenges, tactical simulations, and diplomatic scenarios. Most species excel in at least one area. The Luminar always win the tactical part because of their mental abilities. Jae-woo nodded, but her mind drifted to her dream from the night before. She had been in a room full of maps and models, planning a complex attack. It had felt so natural. On the day of the competition, all students gathered in the Academy's main arena. The ceiling opened to reveal the stars above. Viewing platforms floated for teachers and special guests. Director Han approached Ji-woo before the start. Remember, do your best, but don't. He paused, looking troubled. Just be careful. Careful of what? Ji-woo asked. But Director Han just patted her shoulder and walked away. The physical challenge came first. Students had to run an obstacle course designed to test strength, speed, and endurance. The gravity changed randomly. Walls appeared and disappeared. Water and fire blocked paths. Jae-woo surprised herself. She wasn't the fastest or strongest, but she moved with unexpected grace. Her body seemed to know what to do before her mind did. She finished in the middle of the pack, ahead of many who had mocked humans as weak. Taiho finished first, his telekinetic abilities making the obstacles simple to overcome. He smirked at Ji-woo as he passed her. The tactical simulation was next. Students entered virtual pods where they commanded simulated ships in space battles. The challenges grew more complex with each round. Jae-woo put on the virtual helmet and found herself on a ship bridge. Everything felt familiar, like she had done this 1,000 times before. Her first opponent was a 6-armed student who moved his ships aggressively. Ji-woo remained calm, watching his pattern. Then she struck quickly, using the space debris as cover. Victory came in less than 2 minutes. Round after round, Ji-woo defeated her opponents. Her moves were precise, efficient, and unexpected. The other students watched in growing shock as the scoreboard showed her advancing. In the semifinals, she faced Taiho. A human has never made it this far, he said as they prepared to start. Your luck ends now. Jae-woo said nothing. When the simulation began, Taiho's ships moved in perfect formation, using standard luminary battle tactics. Without hesitation, Ji-woo split her fleet into smaller groups. She used maneuvers with names that came to her mind. Phantom Strike, Shadow Divide, Echo Formation. These were not taught in any academy class. Taiho's expression changed from confidence to confusion to fear. In 7 minutes, his fleet was defeated. When they removed their virtual helmets, the arena was silent. Then whispers spread like fire. How did she know those moves? Those were Dismantler tactics. No human should know that. Jiwu stepped out of the pod, her head pounding with pain. More memories pushed at the edges of her mind. Star maps, battle plans, fleet movements. Director Han watched from above, his face grim. Next to him stood a tall luminary official who hadn't been there before. The official spoke into a communication device, his eyes never leaving Jiwu. "You shouldn't have been able to do that," Taiho said, his voice shaking slightly. "Those tactics, they're classified. Only high-ranking military officers have access to those records." "I don't know how I did it," Jiwu said honestly. "It just felt right." Before they could speak further, the announcer called for the final round of the tactical competition. Jiwu would face a senior student for the championship. As she walked back to the simulation pod, Director Han intercepted her. "Jiwu, I think you should withdraw," he said quietly. "Why?" she asked. "I'm winning." "That's the problem," he replied, looking around nervously. "You're drawing too much attention." Jiwu frowned. "Isn't that the point? To show humans belong here?" Director Han looked like he wanted to say more, but the final call came for competitors. "Be careful in there," was all he said as Jiwu put the helmet back on for the final round. The final round of the tactical competition was different. Instead of facing another student, Jiwu found herself in a simulation of a famous historical battle. "This is the Battle of Centauri Prime," an automated voice announced. "You command the defending fleet. Your goal is to protect the planet from invasion." Jiwu looked at the setup. 50 enemy ships approached the planet. She had only 20 ships to defend it. The situation seemed impossible. But as she studied the map, a strange feeling came over her. She had been here before. She knew this battle. Without hesitation, Jiwu positioned her ships in a formation she somehow knew would work. She placed her fastest ships at specific points around the planet's moons. Then she waited for the enemy to make the first move. In the viewing area, the tall luminary official leaned toward Director Han. "That's the Crescent Defense," he said quietly. "Only one commander ever used it successfully." Director Han's face showed no emotion. Many students study historical battles. Senior official Sung Min. Sung Min's eyes narrowed. This formation was never recorded in any public database. Inside the simulation, Jiwu's head pounded with pain as more memories pushed forward. Her hands moved quickly, giving orders that seemed to come from deep inside her mind. As the enemy fleet advanced, Jiwu's ships struck with perfect timing. They'd moved between the moons, using gravity to increase speed, and then hitting the enemy from unexpected angles. The viewing area fell silent as students and teachers watched in amazement. Jiwu's smaller fleet was systematically taking apart the larger one. "This is impossible," Taiho whispered. "She's fighting exactly like..." "Enough," Sung Min suddenly shouted. He pressed a button on his wrist device, and the simulation shut down. Jiwu removed her helmet, confused. The arena was completely quiet. Sung Min floated down to the arena floor on a small platform. His white eyes glowed with anger as he approached Jiwu. "Who are you really?" he demanded. "I'm Jiwu Park, first-year student from Earth," she replied, backing away slightly. "No human student could know those tactics," Sung Min said. "Those were the exact movements used by the Dismantler at Centauri Prime. I was there. I saw it happen." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Director Han hurried down to the arena floor. "Senior official, this is just a student competition," he said. Perhaps Jiwu studied more history than most. "That battle was classified," Sung Min insisted. His gaze never left Jiwu. Only those who fought there would know those exact movements. Jiwu's head felt like it would split open. Flashes of memory came faster now. Star charts, battle plans, the faces of a crew looking to her for orders. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, pressing her hands to her temples. I just knew what to do. Director Han put an arm around her shoulders. Ji-woo needs medical attention. We'll continue this discussion later. He led her away quickly, but not before she heard Sung-min speaking into his communication device. Contact the High Council. I believe we found the Dismantler. In the medical bay, Director Han gave Ji-woo a small blue pill. This will help with the headache, he said. Ji-woo swallowed it, then asked, what did Sung-min mean? How could I be the Dismantler? That commander would be much older than me. Director Han avoided her eyes. Rest now. We'll talk later. As Ji-woo lay on the medical bed, she noticed Director Han speaking quietly with the doctor. They looked at a brain scan on the wall. Her brain scan. The doctor pointed to several bright spots and shook his head. The memory blocks are failing. The doctor whispered, not realizing Ji-woo could hear. At this rate, full recall will happen within days. We need more time, Director Han replied. The treaty negotiations are still underway. If they learn who she really is before the new agreement is signed. Ji-woo closed her eyes, pretending to sleep. Memory blocks. Treaty negotiations. None of it made sense. Outside the medical bay, Yunji waited anxiously. But someone else was there too. Ta-ho, watching from the shadows, his face unreadable. Ji-woo woke to urgent voices outside her medical room. She kept her eyes closed and listened. You can't take her, Director Han said firmly. She's under Earth protection. The Luminary High Council demands answers. Sung-min replied. If she is the Dismantler, the treaty was signed under false conditions. You have no proof, Director Han insisted. Then let us question her properly, Sung-min said, unless you fear what we might learn. Ji-woo opened her eyes. Her headache was gone, but confusion remained. Why did everyone think she was a famous commander? She was just a student. The doors slid open. Director Han entered with Sung-min and 2 Academy security officers. Ji-woo, how are you feeling? Director Han asked. Better, she said, sitting up. What's happening? Sung-min stepped forward. You will come with us for questioning about your true identity. Director Han moved between them. She's not going anywhere. She's a registered student. The competition results say otherwise, Sung-min replied. Her tactical skills are identical to the Dismantlers. This cannot be coincidence. Ji-woo stood up. I want answers too. Why do you think I'm this commander? I'm only 18 years old. The great conflict ended 10 years ago. A small smile appeared on Sung-min's face. Exactly. The timing is perfect. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the academy. Red lights flashed in the hallway. Warning. Security breach in Sector 7. All students return to quarters. All security personnel report to Sector 7. Director Han's communication device beeped. He listened, then looked at Ji-woo with concern. Someone's trying to access your student records, he said. This is a distraction. Sung-min smiled. How unfortunate. It seems my guards must respond to this emergency. The security officers hurried away, leaving Ji-woo with Director Han and Sung-min. Now, Sung-min said, his eyes glowing brightly, we will have our answers. He raised his hand. Ji-woo felt pressure around her body as Sung-min's telekinetic powers lifted her slightly off the ground. Stop this immediately, Director Han demanded. The truth comes first, Sung-min replied. He focused on Ji-woo. Who are you really? The pressure increased. Ji-woo found it hard to breathe. Pain shot through her head again, worse than before. But this time, instead of fighting it, she let the memories come. Images flooded her mind. She saw herself, older and in a military uniform, standing on the bridge of a battleship. She heard her own voice giving orders. She saw planets and stars and battles. She felt the weight of command, the responsibility for thousands of lives. I am, Ji-woo whispered, her eyes growing wide. Suddenly, the door burst open. Yunji rushed in. followed by Taiho. "Let her go," Yunji shouted. To everyone's surprise, Taiho raised his own hand. His telekinetic powers pushed against Sungmin's, freeing Jiwoo. "This is not how we do things," Taiho said to Sungmin. "Not anymore." Sungmin's face twisted with anger. "You defend the enemy, the one who killed your father." "I want the truth," Taiho replied. "Not more violence." Jiwoo fell to her knees, holding her head. The memories were too much, too fast. She looked up at Director Han. "It's true, isn't it?" she asked. "I am the Dismantler." The room fell silent. Director Han sighed deeply, then nodded. "Yes," he admitted. "You are Commander Jiwoo Park of the Earth Defense Force, the youngest fleet commander in human history, the architect of our victory." "But how?" Yunji asked. "She's too young. Age acceleration during space travel," Director Han explained. "And after the war, memory suppression. It was your choice, Jiwoo. You volunteered." "Why would I erase my own memories?" Jiwoo asked. Director Han looked at Sungmin and Taiho. "Because many species would never accept peace if they knew the Dismantler still lived. Your sacrifice made the treaty possible." Sungmin stepped back, his eyes cold. "The treaty is invalid. It was built on lies." "No," Jiwoo said, standing up as more memories returned. "It was built on hope, on the chance for something better than war." She turned to Taiho. "I remember your father. He was a good commander, honorable." Taiho's expression showed confusion and pain. "You remember killing him. I remember respecting him," Jiwoo replied softly. "War forced us to be enemies, but we don't have to be." Outside, the alarms continued to blare, but inside the small medical room, the fate of the peace treaty hung in the balance. The alarms stopped suddenly. For a moment, everyone in the medical room stood frozen in silence. Then Jiwoo spoke. "I need to know everything. Tell me who I really am." Director Han looked at Sungmin. "This should be a private conversation." "I'm not leaving," Sungmin said firmly. "The Luminary Council must know the full truth." Taiho stepped forward. "Then I'm staying too. My people deserve to hear this from both sides." Director Han sighed and nodded. "Very well." He turned to Jiwoo. "What do you remember?" Jiwoo closed her eyes. The memories were becoming clearer. "I was a tactical officer on the Earth defense ship Horizon. When our commander was killed in the first wave of the Luminary attack, I took command. I was only 28 years old. The youngest fleet commander in human history," Director Han added, "and the most successful. We were outnumbered in every battle." Jiwoo continued, her voice growing stronger. "But humans are good at fighting against the odds. We think differently. We see patterns where others don't. We take risks." Sungmin's face hardened. "You destroyed over 300 luminary ships, thousands of lives lost. And humans lost millions when your forces bombed Earth's colonies." Jiwoo replied without anger. "War is terrible for everyone." She turned to Taiho. "Your father led the First Fleet. He was a brilliant commander, but he followed the traditional luminary battle doctrine. I studied it. I found its weaknesses." "You tricked him," Taiho said quietly. Jiwoo nodded. "War is also about deception. But I never celebrated his death. He fought with honor." Director Han stepped closer to Jiwoo. "After you forced the Alliance to the negotiating table, many species wanted revenge. They wouldn't sign a peace treaty if the Dismantler remained active. Some wanted you executed as a war criminal. So I disappeared," Jiwoo said, another memory becoming clear. "But how did I become this?" She gestured to her younger body. "Advanced medical technology," Director Han explained. "Age regression coupled with memory suppression. You volunteered. You said peace was worth any personal sacrifice. The procedure was meant to be permanent," he continued. "You would live a new life as a normal student, never knowing your past. but something went wrong. Your tactical abilities couldn't be fully suppressed, and now the memory blocks are failing. Yunji, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. Why put her in the academy? With the children of those she fought against. That seems cruel. It was the safest place. Director Han replied. No one would look for the Dismantler here, and we could monitor her recovery. Recovery? Some men asked sharply. The procedure damaged her brain, Director Han said softly. Without proper care, she would have died within a year. Here, we could help her heal. Jie Wu touched her temples, feeling a new understanding of the headaches that had plagued her. So what happens now? She asked. Some Min straightened his back. Now you come with me to the Luminary Council. They will decide your fate. No, Tai Ho said, surprising everyone. The treaty protects all citizens, even former enemies. Taking her would violate the peace. She deceived us all. Some Min's eyes glowed with anger. She sacrificed everything for peace, Tai Ho countered. Would you have done the same? Before Sun Min could answer, his communication device beeped. He listened, then his expression changed to one of triumph. It seems the decision is made, he said. Luminary forces have surrounded the academy. The High Council has ordered the Dismantler's immediate arrest. You can't do this, Director Han protested. It will restart the war. Perhaps that's for the best. Some Min replied coldly. Some wrongs cannot be forgiven. Jie Wu stood taller, and for a moment, everyone could see the commander she had once been. I've faced worse odds before, she said quietly. We need to move. Director Han said urgently. There's a secure room in the lower levels. We can hold there until Earth forces respond. Jie Wu shook her head. No. Running will only confirm their suspicions. They will take you, Ji Wu, Director Han insisted, and the treaty will collapse. Jie Wu looked at each person in the room. Her mind was working differently now. She could see patterns, possibilities, outcomes. The commander inside her was awakening. Sung Min, she said calmly, do you truly want another war? Millions more will die on both sides. The tall luminary's face showed no emotion. Justice comes first. You cannot hide from your actions. I'm not hiding, Ji Wu replied. I'm standing right here. From the hallway came the sound of heavy footsteps. Luminary security forces were approaching. Tai Ho looked torn. This isn't right, he muttered. Jie Wu turned to him. Your people believe strength is everything. Show them a different kind of strength. The strength to forgive. The door slid open. 4 luminary guards entered, their silver armor gleaming. Each carried a stun weapon. Commander Ji Wu Park. The lead guard announced, you are under arrest by order of the Luminary High Council for war crimes against our people. Director Han stepped forward. She is under Earth protection. This arrest violates the treaty. The treaty is suspended, Sung Min said with satisfaction. The deception has been exposed. The guards moved toward Ji Wu. Everything seemed to slow down as her tactical mind assessed the situation. 4 guards, simple formation, standard weapons, predictable training. Without warning, Ji Wu moved. She slid between the first 2 guards with surprising speed. As they turned, she grabbed a metal tray from the medical table and threw it like a disc. It hit the lead guard's weapon, knocking it from his hand. Ji Wu caught the falling weapon and rolled beneath the second guard's grasp. In one fluid motion, she disabled the weapon and tossed it aside. Everyone stared in shock. Ji Wu hadn't fought like a soldier following training. She had moved like water, finding the easiest path around all obstacles. Stand down, Sun Min shouted. The remaining guards fired their stun weapons. Ji Wu grabbed a reflective medical screen and angled it perfectly. The stun beams bounced back, hitting 2 of the guards. They fell to the floor, paralyzed. The last guard rushed at her. Ji Wu sidestepped at the last second. She used his momentum to send him crashing into Sung Min. Both fell in a tangle of limbs. Jiwu stood calmly in the center of the room. She hadn't thrown a single punch, yet all 4 guards were disabled. Impossible, Sung Min gasped as he pushed the guard off him. You're just a student. I was never just a student, Jiwu replied. And I never killed when I didn't have to. That's why Earth won. She turned to Director Han. We need to leave. More will come. Yunji grabbed Jiwu's arm. I know a way out. Through the maintenance tunnels. Taiho stepped forward. I'm coming with you. Why? Jiwu asked, surprised. Because I want to understand, he replied. And because this is wrong. You can't be punished for winning a war that my people started. Sung Min struggled to his feet. Traitor, your father died by her orders. My father died following your council's orders, Taiho shot back. The same council that now breaks the peace he died to eventually secure. Jiwu, Yunji, Director Han, and Taiho moved toward the door. You won't escape, Sung Min warned. The academy is surrounded. Jiwu turned back with a small smile. I faced your entire fleet with just 17 ships. Do you really think a school blockade will stop me? They ran into the hallway as alarms began to sound again. Yunji led them to a maintenance hatch hidden behind a wall panel. This way, she said. It leads to the shuttle bay. As they disappeared into the dark tunnel, Sung Min's angry shouts faded behind them. But the danger was far from over. The hunt for the Dismantler had begun again. The maintenance tunnel was dark and narrow. Jiwu led the way, moving with confidence despite the dim lighting. Her memories were returning faster now, filling in the gaps of her past. There should be an exit hatch ahead, Yunji whispered from behind. They reached a small metal door. Jiwu opened it carefully and peered out. They were in a lower level of the academy, near the shuttle bay. We need to get to Bay 3, Director Han said. There's an Earth diplomatic shuttle there. It has special clearance to leave during emergencies. Jiwu nodded, but her head suddenly throbbed with pain. She leaned against the wall as more memories flooded her mind. She remembered the final battle. Her ship damage, systems failing, the luminary fleet surrounding Earth, her desperate gamble that no one expected, taking her remaining ships directly into the enemy formation, targeting their command vessels with precision strikes. She remembered the peace talks afterward, the anger and hatred in the eyes of the defeated, the demands for her execution, and her own decision to disappear, to become someone else so that peace could have a chance. Jiwu. Taiho's voice pulled her back to the present. Are you all right? I remember everything now, she said quietly. The final battle. Your father's ship was the last to fall. Taiho's face showed pain, but also curiosity. Did he fight well? Jiwu nodded. Until the end. He refused to surrender even when I offered terms. He believed victory was the only acceptable outcome. That sounds like him, Taiho said with a sad smile. We need to move, Director Han urged. Sung Min will have alerted all security forces by now. They continued through the empty corridors, avoiding the main hallways. Academy students had been ordered to their quarters, leaving the paths clear. Why did you help me escape? Jiwu asked Taiho as they walked. He was quiet for a moment. All my life, I was taught that humans won through trickery and dishonor. That the Dismantler was a monster who killed without mercy. But, Jiwu prompted, but you could have killed those guards easily. You didn't. And you gave up everything for peace. Taiho looked at her directly. My people talk about honor, but you lived it. They reached the shuttle bay entrance. Director Han placed his hand on the security scanner. The door remained closed. They locked us out, he said, his face grim. Jiwu studied the control panel. Another memory came to her, bypassing security systems during a mission behind enemy lines. I can open it, she said. She removed the panel cover and began rearranging the connections inside. This security system is similar to luminary military designs. How do you know all this? Yunji asked in amazement. Special operations training, Ji-woo replied as she worked. Before I commanded fleets, I led small strike teams. The door slid open. There. The shuttle bay was large and empty except for 3 small ships. An alarm was flashing silently on the wall. They've initiated lockdown, Director Han said. We have minutes at most. As they hurried toward the Earth shuttle, Ji-woo felt a strange sense of calm. Her tactical mind was fully engaged now, calculating odds, planning moves ahead. Even if we reach Earth space, the luminary will demand I be handed over, she said. This won't end with our escape. We just need time, Director Han replied. Time to contact the right people, to explain what happened. Ji-woo stopped walking. No, running solves nothing. The problem isn't that they know who I am. It's that they don't understand why I made the choices I did. What are you saying? Yunji asked. I'm saying I won't spend my life hiding again. Ji-woo turned to face them. The treaty is in danger because of misunderstanding and old hatred. I need to address that directly. That's suicide, Director Han argued. Some men wants revenge, not understanding. Perhaps, Ji-woo agreed. But I've faced worse odds before. Tai-ho looked at her with new respect. What's your plan? Before Ji-woo could answer, the shuttle bay doors burst open. Some men entered with a full squad of luminary guards. There is nowhere left to run, Dismantler, he called out. Ji-woo stepped forward, away from her friends. I'm done running. Sung Min's eyes glowed with triumph as he approached Ji-woo. The guards surrounded the group, weapons ready. The great Dismantler, finally captured, Sung Min said. You will face justice for your crimes. I want to speak to the full Galactic Council, Ji-woo replied calmly. Sung Min laughed. You are in no position to make demands. It's not a demand. It's an offer. Ji-woo stood straight, her voice steady. Take me to the council, and I will tell them everything. The full truth about the war, the peace, and what happens next. Sung Min hesitated, surprised by her confidence. What trick is this? He asked suspiciously. No trick, just truth. Ji-woo looked around at the guards. You all believe humans won through deception, through some dishonorable tactic. You're wrong. She took a step forward. The guards raised their weapons, but some men held up a hand, curious. Humans won because we think differently, Ji-woo continued. We see patterns you miss. We try solutions you would never consider. We adapt while you follow rigid doctrines. Is that what you call the deaths of thousands? Different thinking. Sung Min's voice was bitter. War is terrible for everyone, Ji-woo acknowledged. But it was your leaders who rejected our first 7 peace offers. It was your fleet that destroyed human colonies without warning. Murmurs spread among the guards. Some looked at each other in confusion. Lies, Sung Min shouted. Let's find out, Ji-woo challenged. The council has access to all records. Let them hear both sides. Tai-ho stepped forward to stand beside Ji-woo. I support this request. As a luminary citizen, I demand the right to hear the full truth. Sung Min's face darkened with anger. You side with your father's killer. I side with peace, Tai-ho replied firmly. Something my father never lived to see. After a long moment, Sung Min nodded sharply. Very well. The council will hear you before your punishment. It changes nothing. 3 days later, Ji-woo stood before the Galactic Council. Representatives from 12 species sat in a large semicircle. The room was filled with diplomats, students, and military officers. Tai-ho and Yunji sat in the front row. Director Han stood nearby as Earth's representative. Commander Ji-woo Park, the council leader began. You stand accused of war crimes against multiple civilizations. How do you respond? Ji-woo looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those who had once been her enemies. I did what was necessary to protect my people, she said clearly, just as each of you would do. But then I did something more. When victory was mine, I chose peace. She activated a holo display that showed a star map. After the final battle, Earth forces controlled these key systems. We could have pushed our advantage. Instead, I offered terms that respected all species. Another image appeared, Ji-Woo 10 years younger, in a military uniform, at the peace talks. And when it became clear that some would never accept peace while I lived, I chose to give up everything. My identity, my memories, my very self, for the chance at lasting harmony between our peoples. Sung Min stood up. Pretty words cannot wash away blood. No, they cannot. Ji-Woo agreed. Nothing can undo the losses on any side. But we must choose what comes next. She looked directly at Tayo. At the academy, I was mocked for being human, called weak, primitive. Yet here I stand, the very person who once dismantled your fleets, now offering friendship instead of victory. Ji-Woo turned back to the council. Humans aren't stronger or smarter than any of you, but we understand something vital. True strength lies in knowing when not to use your power. She held out her hands. I surrendered everything once for peace. I would do it again. The question is, can you do the same? Can you choose understanding over vengeance, future over past? The council chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, Tayo stood up and walked to Ji-Woo's side. My father died believing only in strength, he said loudly. I choose to live believing in something better. One by one, other students from the academy joined them. Creatures of different shapes, sizes, and species. Even some luminary students stepped forward. The council leader looked at this unusual gathering. Former enemies standing together. Ji-Woo waited, ready to accept whatever came next. Whatever happened, she faced it now as her true self, not just a human girl who had been mocked, but a commander who had changed the galaxy, twice. Once through war, and now, perhaps, through peace.